Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Oslo Esports Cup. It's the fourth day of action, and you're about to find out why the video is named what it's named. Because the last thing that you want, except maybe an angry Incredible Hulk, is an angry Magnus Carlsen. Today's matchup, and a friendly reminder of the format, there are 8 players. They all play a match against one another, and it's a winner-take-all style match. There are 4 rapid games, and if you win the rapid portion of a head-to-head, you get $7,500. If you go to the Blitz playoff, meaning if the rapid section is tied 2-2, you get $5,000 for the winner and $2,500 for the loser. Otherwise, if you just play a rapid match and you lose, you get no money. And today's matchup is between the leader of the entire event, Praggnanandhaa, who has 9 out of 9, meaning he has won every match in rapid, and Magnus, who has I guess I should say Magnus Carlsen, right? He deserves the last name as well, who is 2 out of 3. But the reason the video is named what it's named is because several weeks ago, Pragg beat Magnus, right? And then it became a complete sensation. It became a crazy story. So I feel like now every time they play, this narrative is going to exist, and Magnus is going to do everything he can not to lose. Now, this is actually the second rapid game. Magnus won a very long endgame in game 1, so Pragg is now looking to strike back. And this is a line that's been very popular recently, the isolated pawn semi-Tarrasch. It's been played a lot, like in the World Cup. It's been played by Duda. It's been played by Magnus. In fact, I think these two played it against each other. And the position, from a very early standpoint, just looks a lot more comfortable for white, in the sense that you have very good development. This is a pawn that can be a target for the rook, the queen, the knight. And oftentimes what black will do is just play around the pawn, just sort of pretend like it doesn't exist, because if it gets captured, black is going to try to create some active counterplay. So that's what Pragg was trying, Pragg was trying to corral the pawn. He was trying to take a little bit of space, and, he brought his rook to the d file. h3 is just kind of a pass back move, rook c1. I mean, Pragg is doing everything right. He now moves his queen out of the way, so the rook is the one pressuring, right? It's not the queen doing the battle. And queen e8, and right now Pragg has his biggest advantage of the game. On paper, like bishop d3, it's like 0.8, it's slowly going up. Magnus begins kind of getting some counterplay here, but he gets his pieces pushed back. Here comes a4. Pragg is just making a bunch of very natural and good moves, and he's just doing what you do against an isolated pawn. Knight b6 played by Magnus, so he pressuring on a4. Knight will maybe come to c4 in the future. Good control of the b4 square as well. And bishop f5. Pragg decides to trade off this bishop, trying to remove the defense here. If this trade occurs, queen f5 is very nice, but knight f5 is even better. This knight pressures everything, and it's very hard to get rid of this knight. So, Magnus plays bishop back to d7, and Pragg still puts his knight on f5. Pragg, is honestly just doing a very nice job. Looking very much like he's not just going to beat Magnus in one game, but he's going to even the match, and, maybe he's going to beat him in a series, and then it's going to be another sensation. But Magnus is... The problem with when you're the GOAT is that you're not just the front runner. You don't just attack, you also are very good at defending. So Magnus does a nice job here, even though the defense is maybe a little bit ugly with the bishop on d8 and everything in black's position makes sense. And every good player at this level knows how to defend the position for a very long time. And Pragg here gets a little bit hasty. And he starts kind of... You notice that 3 of his pieces here are all jumbled up. And the problem is that, Magnus will not be playing g5, which looks like a fork but simply hangs 2 pawns. So that's not, that's not what you're going to get when you get a guy like Magnus. Magnus is going to look to liquidate, right? He's trying to liquidate the pieces here. The move rook g4 here should be played, probably lining up an attack, but then g5 is very much possible. So Pragg here decides to take on d8, and I don't exactly know what he overlooked. Perhaps he overlooked that after knight f4, there is no knight e7 check. Like, he might have calculated knight e7, and then, king h8, knight c8, and this actually works, because this knight is hanging, and even though you can play this, I can go here. If you play this, then I just take, and I'm just a piece up. Maybe what Pragg missed was that after knight e7, he can sack his queen, which is a heartbreaking move. The point is that after bishop e7, there is rook c1! This is called an attraction sacrifice. So when you sacrifice a piece to bring a piece closer to a square, and now this knight forks, and Magnus just ends up a piece up. So I think what happened is, I imagine that's what Pragg played. Bishop d8, knight f4, and just totally forgot knight e7, queen e7, rook c1. And so now he has to bail out. The problem is that in this endgame, one guy has a rook for a bishop. And the other problem is that that guy is not a Gotham subscriber. Yeah, shocking that Magnus is not subscribed. But also, you know, he's not like 1100. He's not going to lose the game with the extra rook. Pragg does his very best, but Magnus has absolutely everything under control. His king is now going to come in. This bishop is actually just straight up trapped. So rook a8 is coming as well. That's even more heartbreaking. The bishop went all the way back there at the beginning of the calculation and just got trapped. So heartbreaking end for Pragg, who actually was applying systematic pressure and slowly improving his position. But the second that he had to make that, you know, that leap into the position, got his pieces a little bit tangled up, and Magnus out-calculating him defensively. So it's 2-0 now. Magnus now has white. Pragg has to win 2 games on demand. What do you do when you have to win 2 games on demand? You just try to play chess. You know, we actually have a very similar looking opening to one that we just had, except in this game, there is no pawn here. So again, if you just instant replay it from the opening stage, look at this position, right? And there's a pawn on e3 in this opening, but it's slightly different move order. And we get this variation where white plays bishop b5, and now we have another isolated pawn situation. The difference being, if you look at the opening of this game, it's kind of d5 and e3. And here it's d5 and e3, but a slightly different format. Like, white is actually applying pressure to the c6 knight, whereas in this opening, that was not happening. So black castled and then played knight c6. Here, you're actually applying straight up pressure to it, but then you just back up and you decide to play bishop b2. So it's slightly different. In the other version, there's a bishop on h4. Again, just going back and forth. Just interesting, right? The kind of different dynamics of the opening. And Pragg here decides to give up his light-squared bishop and plays bishop back to b8. So he has bad intentions for Magnus. He would like to checkmate Magnus on the h2 square. Now, that diagonal does look very beautiful if you can, you know, play the move a6. And that's probably what he's going to do. And now, just waiting a little bit, you know, maybe if he sneaks in queen d6, Magnus won't see it. The problem is that, you know, after like something like queen d3, you can't just play queen d6, because the truth is, just the very simple move g3 prevents everything, and black is left with some kind of very bad weaknesses. You can play a5, sure, but again, rook c1, rook d1, exactly how Pragg played it, by putting his rooks to the DNC files, and black just has no way through. Like, black can play normal-looking moves like this, but there's just never any attack. And if you get a little bit too desperate with something like knight g3, and there's just no mate. It looks like it's terrifying, but there's just no mate. So you cannot go all in and sacrifice, right? So Pragg delays a little bit. He still plays knight e4. I mean, he's still playing the natural moves, rook c2, but Magnus is just ignoring him, and he's like, I'm going to go here, and maybe here, and I'm going to play against your weaknesses. Pragg decides that he's had enough, and he plays rook to h4. The idea of rook h4 is very simple. He doesn't want g3 to be possible. So he's going to play queen d6, right? And then, you know, rook h3 when g3 happens. That's the point. So he does that. And Magnus just plays king f1. You know what the craziest thing is? You can still go g3, I think. I think rook h3, then you threaten mate. And if f6, you have a fork, which is incredible. And then after rook h7, you basically just play like queen a4 and win the pawn. So you just say this rook is garbage, but that's not very human. Instead, Magnus just plays king f1 and is basically like, Pragg, boss, why is this here? Like, why is it here? Okay, you can go queen h2, and you can even play queen h1. Right? There's nothing there. So Magnus uses the aggression that he knows his opponent has to display against him, plays rook c8. And believe it or not, as dangerous as this looks, and as completely well insulated as this king looks, it's force mate from this position for white. And Magnus demonstrates that by trading and just very calmly playing rook c8. The thing is, we sometimes as beginners and intermediate, even advanced players, they're like, oh, the king is in danger. I always try to convey this message. Don't just say the king is in danger. Where is the danger? Show me the move. because queen h1 just runs into king e2. And the other guy's king is really in danger, because then there's queen c8 and bishop a3, or you just bail out and don't take the rook, but then you just lose a bishop. So we have rook f5, and now Magnus uncorks, rook takes f8, pure savagery here. The point is that you're gonna have to grab it. If you don't grab it, then you're just gonna lose in the long run. You're just gonna lose. Your king gets hunted out. So he takes, and now a beautiful force sequence. Queen c8 check, king e7 only move, bishop a3. Now there are two only moves. Pragg chooses to go out with queen d8 check, and now his escape route is covered. If he goes to e5 or e6, it really makes no difference. Queen e7 is mate. I have a feeling that Pragg just did not want to prolong the game. I think he very much knew that it was mate no matter what. The thing is, we also, as beginner and intermediate players, we say, oh, I hung mate. No, you didn't. Black did not lose this game because of king f6. You have to identify the reason you lost the game, right? You lost the game because you got a little bit over eager to play over here, and you kind of just misevaluated White's defensive resources. I mean, Pragg also is down 2-0. He has to play for a win. Are you going to beat Magnus 2 games on demand? I don't know. Maybe not. But at the end, there is also an amazing sequence if you do play queen d6, and it's a force mate in like 9 with queen c7. You can take with check, but actually this is even better according to Stockfish. Threatening mate in 1, g5, and then White just... These are all the top Stockfish moves to force mate, and you force mate in a very savage way. You don't even give a check. You actually move the bishop to f8 and set up this, and you cover the king's escape. So, yeah, force mate or not, Magnus Carlsen got mad and won 3-0. He won every single game of the Rapid in different ways. I mean, the first game was a brutal long endgame. The second game was a defensive effort that White couldn't press forward, and this game was just convincing. So Pragg beat Magnus a couple of weeks ago, and I think Magnus is just mad. I honestly think that he is not ever going to let it happen as long as he can. So he is now tied for first place with Pragg, who has a little bit of a setback, learning from the GOAT. And this is a matchup between, now we will cover every other matchup. This is Liem and Hansen. This one was, I think, their second game. This game was interesting because the opening was very locked. As you can see, Black has played e5, c5 to prevent White from playing the move d4. White has played e4, c4 to get the d5 square and prevent d5, which is all the more shocking that here Liem plays the move d4. This must be theory of some sort. Believe it or not, you cannot take this because e5 wins the game. The point is that you're threatening the knight, obviously. If de5, you take, and your bishop sees the bishop. So when they take you, knight c6 check wins the queen. So you cannot take ed4. You also cannot take cd4. You would think so, but there's knight d4 with the same idea. The same exact idea, and now obviously I would just get this. So knight d4, and this is good for White. So instead of that, we get this position and knight d5. And basically this game is going to be a battle of the outposts. White is always a little bit better because White goes first. And in any position of symmetry with similar game plans and intentions, the person that goes first, obviously, will force the other person to respond to their rhythm, right? So h6, and Liem begins advancing with b4, and he does exactly that. He plays b4. So Eric seems to have the position under control, but it's always a little bit unpleasant. And the second that the knight retreats from this side, you play h4. You now force your opponent to play h5. You immediately take advantage of the square. You force your opponent to play f6, right? And then now you're ready to put either the rook there or the rook there. And finally, we have the knights kind of mirror imaging one another. But the problem is that, again, one guy is pushing the pace. The other guy is trying to meet him and defend him. So here, Liem decides to trade both pairs of rooks and play knight to e1, rotating the knight. And all closed positions oftentimes are decided with the pawn break, right? So we have the queen controlling these squares, the knight pressuring the middle, and now the move f4. Now, make no mistake, the engine says the position is 0-0-0, but when you are pressured on the queen side, the king side, and in the middle, right? I mean, this middle is super congested, a lot to calculate. It's a tough position. I mean, chess is hard to play when everything is so congested and cramped. and as time is ticking. So queen e6, and then here Liem finds a nice idea, f5, cracking open that kingside, gf5, and he realizes that he doesn't have to take, he can fake the infiltration and go back to d1. And who's going to guard this pawn? Nobody. Let me tell you why, because if you play king g6, the congested center, oops, and you're going to lose a queen. So you cannot defend, and this is usually when things go really bad, because this is a terrifying, terrifying thing to deal with. So Hansen immediately reacts, but the problem is that now after ed5 and bishop d4, removing that knight, queen h5 and queen f5, Liem emerges very temporarily up a pawn. The problem is that when you win the pawn back, this pawn survives. So go all the way back. This knight and this knight are, when they get taken, they're going to become outposts. They're going to become pawns. So you remove the knight, but you're left with a pawn. And not all pawns are the same. All right? Just not all pawns are the same at all. This pawn is much better than this one, because this one cannot be opposed. And the queen is coming into e6, and the pawn is going to promote. That pawn, as you're going to see throughout this game, is the difference maker, because that pawn ends up becoming an e-pawn, and then it becomes a decoy later in this endgame with e7, so that the h-pawn can promote. The king is close to both pawns, but he's too far. He's got to select one, and he ends up, the bishop has to take, and you can't take because of this. So Liem gets into a bishop versus pawns endgame, and Hansen has to resign. I mean, he didn't have to play a4, but he can't make any progress because every single pawn is monitored by the bishop. So this is just an absolutely heartbreaking endgame, because he has all these pawns, but they're all on the wrong squares. And Liem wins a very nice game with kind of systematic pressure, long-term pressure, and yeah, black is just out of moves. Literally, the king is laser beamed off of his own pawn. And if he goes here, just king f6, obviously. The pawns can go together, but the problem is they're just going to be stopped. The bishop just will always control the pawns. So light squares prove to be superior. Liem wins a very nice game. And I think, yeah, Liem is doing quite well. He has 6 points out of a possible 12 with a win over Magnus. I mean, you can't really complain about that. So he picks up the $7,500. The next game that I have for you is game number 6. I'm going to show you 2 games from the match between Duda and Mamedyarov. This was a banger of a match. Duda led 1.5 after winning the first rapid game. Mamedyarov has a game with the black pieces, and he plays a Rogozin, because why the hell not? It's one of the best openings. CD, ED, queen a4, and we get a game where Duda's just trying to, he's trying to keep things simple, keep things solid. Mamedyarov is kind of having none of it, though. By the way, can we just address that the bishop retreats to its home square, and so does the queen? It's like they're setting up their pieces. So black is like, all right, this knight is very stupid in front of my c-pawn, so I'm going to move it and play c6 to defend my center and control the b5 square. Knight e5, knight f5, and a couple moves later, we have an exchange and queen g3. Now, this idea by Duda to play knight e5, queen f3 is very peculiar, because I don't really know what he was intending. Like, maybe here he should have played queen e2, bishop d6, and went for a stonewall setup with f4. Like this, at least I can understand. But why would you play knight e5, which obviously needs to be supported by this pawn, and then proceed to trade your bishop, and then try to get the stonewall setup? So the secret to booting out a knight against the stonewall setup is to kick it out with the f-pawn, which is exactly what Mamedyarov does. So, yeah, I don't know. Duda here just straight up hangs a pawn. A very, very strange sequence of moves here. Like, to bring the knight and the queen, maybe Duda thought he had some knight g4. I don't know what he thought. I didn't ask him. I don't know. Maybe he thought he had e4. I don't know. Again, I don't know. He kind of mixes up some plans here, and he gets into serious trouble. And Mamedyarov really does not hesitate here. I mean, he swoops in with the bishop, chops off the knight. He's now up 2 pawns. But he doesn't end this game with any nonsensical conversion into an endgame. He ends this game in brutal fashion. He gets both pieces down to the first rank. He hunts the king out to g3 and g4, and he ends the game in style by forcing the pawns up in front of the king. Check, here, check, and just when it looks like the king is going to be well insulated, a beautiful finish. Sacrificing the queen for the rook. The point is, you cannot take with the g-pawn, and if you take like this, it's rook f1, And whatever you block with, or king g4, rook e4 is mate. And the king gets suffocated to death among his own pieces. Now, it's very important you play rook f1, because if you play it this way, then you're a complete idiot. So that's not good. So you have to play rook f1 first. So a beautiful queen sacrifice finish, and the rapid portion was all square, so they go to playoffs, right? They go to the playoffs, so now even the loser will get $2,500. And this was one of their blitz games, and it was a short one. So again, we have this position, but this time Mamedyarov goes for a semi-Slav defense. He does not play Rogozin. We have a Miran with e3, knight d7, and now queen c2. And Mamedyarov plays b6, so doesn't develop his bishop, trying to put the bishop here. The problem with doing it this way is that you can get rushed with bishop d3, and this idea to play a very quick e4. So again, if you don't put the bishop on d6 fast enough, then e4 is very, very powerful. It's one of the reasons why, bishop d6 and castling is so prioritized, because white's entire idea is to build up for e4. Mamedyarov plays a very, very provocative variation, which is just comfortably better for white. And now takes, and bishop g5. Now, I think maybe here bishop f4 or even bishop e3 is fine. It's a very provocative variation because you just have some serious weaknesses here. Like you need to be able to defend them, right? With h6, etc. But he does. I mean, he's Mamedyarov. He knows what he's doing. I still would not recommend allowing white to get this. I do suppose it's fine, but I wonder if Duda could have done it even faster. Like maybe even here he could have gone for e4, but maybe not. It's a very provocative variation nonetheless. I would not recommend playing like this, but Mamedyarov can do what he wants because he's 76 times the player that I will be. So he does it this way, and c5. Duda takes, and now Mamedyarov takes the knight on f3 and damages the pawn structure, and then plays bc5. Now, everything in his position is relatively well protected. If bishop f6, he will not be taking with the g-pawn. He will be completely fine giving up the c-pawn because the bishop is hanging on d3. So rook d1 and queen b6. And everything seemed to be going relatively well for Mamedyarov. Bishop d8 back. And here he plays the move knight h5. The point of knight h5 is obviously to trade bishops and then put the knight on f4 and then play queen g6 mate. So again, look how quickly things can go wrong. I mean, right now you're covering the square, but I'm just going to hypothetically throw the game. You could lose pretty quickly. The knight on f4 and the queen. The problem is that Duda's not going to do that, and instead, Duda uncorks nastiness. Very nasty stuff here with the absolutely gangster move, bishop takes. Ooh. I always like to say, when an impossible move is possible, the game is over, right? That move is disgusting. The point is that after rook f7, rook goes into e8. This is the only move. King h7 is illegal, and now you will remove the defender of the rook, and even though you lose a bishop in the process, you will win a rook over here as well. So, yeah, and it's game over. So king f7 is played instead, and the king still gets hunted out into the middle, and now the queen is lost with rook e6. The engine here tries to claim that losing the queen like this, the game will actually proceed for a little bit longer, and it's not over. But unfortunately, this is a very different story because the queen is too close, and it'll harass the rook, it'll win the pawn. Yeah, it's just bad news. So, nice tactical finish with bishop takes f7. Duda takes the match in tie breaks over Mamedyarov. I think he's also having a good event. I think, Duda's in third. 7 points out of 12. So, I guess he's won 2 matches in the tie breaks, and he's won a match in just regular time control. So, he only lost to Magnus. And then he won a match in rapid. He won 2 in tie breaks. That's why he has 3 + 2 + 2, which is 7 out of 12. Okay, so there you go. Prague and Magnus have not needed any tie breaks. The last game that I have for you is the tie-break game between Jordan van Foreest and Anish Giri. These guys drew all 4 rapid games because they are, art school students. And this one was an interesting one. It's a blitz game, so Jordan begins with kind of the Hikaru special, the ready, with b3, bishop b2, d4, and a big trade early. So big battery here, double A, pressure over here. Bishop e2, bishop b7. I'm actually very curious. Is AA and AAA a universal measurement for batteries? Like, you know what I mean? I know America, we like to do things in feet and Fahrenheit, while the rest of the world does it Celsius and you know the other measurement system, which I'm blanking on. Metric, or is that what we use? No, universal. Oh god, this is so embarrassing. I should just stick to chess recaps. I can't remember if metric is the universal one or if metric is the American one. Okay, whatever. I don't know. We like to make things more confusing. You know how many feet there are in a mile? 5,082, 5,280. I'm having numerical dyslexia. I don't even know. Not the point, all right? If you made it this far in this video, I'm sorry. Getting a little... Anyway. Bishop e7, c4 castles, knight c3, bishop c6. I really like Jordan's position. He has good center control. He's going to play rook fd1 and rook ac1. Just kidding. He's going to go here for some reason. I really don't understand why you wouldn't have gone here and here. We just saw 2 games where Magnus and Prague did this. They put their rooks on f and c, fd1 and ac1, but apparently Jordan knows best. What are you going to do with this rook, though? Okay, beats me. a6, a4, not letting him go b5. Queen b8, trying to fight for the dark squares and also maybe play b5 in the future. And now Jordan gets wild. He decides that this is the idea. So he put the rook on the d file so he could trade, open up his own king, and play king h1, rook g1, right? To try to complement this attack. Now, in a perfect world, that looks great. That honestly looks really interesting. Again, if you just do nothing with black, let's just, I always like to do it like this. If you just do nothing, then knight e4 and zoom zoom, right? Everybody's going to g7. Everybody's coming to the party, have a real good time. All right? Dancing in the desert. System of a Down. Queen b7, knight e4, and, you know, Jordan's just kind of slowly making his way over there. The problem is his opponent's really good, so he's going to defend himself. The knight retreats confidently, just making sure that's not mate, and then kicks out the queen and plays the move d5. So you deal with flank attacks like this by striking back in the center. And in making his opponent defend himself, like Jordan has been doing, he actually gave Anish a really good position. So Anish has a very well-coordinated position. So cd5, rook d5, and he gets both rooks off. And the problem is that in the long run, this structure is better for black. It just is, because white has more weaknesses. So king g2, we enter a brand new phase of the game, but it's blitz, so you know something's going to happen that's really stupid. Here, Anish can take over the game completely by playing the move f5, forcing this knight away from the middle, and then playing queen c4, and actually white just straight up has no way of guarding his pawns. So Jordan gets punished for being a little bit too exotic with his play. His queen is over here, you know, locked out of the rest of the game. But instead of that, Anish plays h6, and Jordan tries to get his queen back to the 4th rank with knight g3 and, you know, trying to... Still, queen b3 is winning. I mean, queen b3 is straight up a fork. It's literally a fork. If you defend the pawn, queen takes a4. Anish decides to go for the endgame. This move I will never understand in a million years. Anish is far better of a player than I am. And I guess he didn't want anything with knight h5. But, I mean, bishop over knight in most endgames. And also, this improves the structure. I guess when Anish played that, he was like, well, I can never lose. Maybe he had very low time. His logic was like, well, I'm not going to lose this game. So, you know, bishop takes g3, which is fair, but... At the same time, after knight g3, queen b3, it's not only that he might never lose, he might also win the game. So, yeah, he trades, improves the structure for his opponent, and plays b5. And I guess here he's like, well, I'm never losing this position. I mean, and he's not wrong. He's really not wrong. But the game is continuing because somebody does lose, right? The knight gets into c4, e4, queen g5, looking for the queen trade. And Jordan's like, nope. Jordan, you're not the one playing for a win. You don't have a choice. Trade the damn queen. f5 takes. Look at Jordan trying to bring his queen back into the game. Now, let me tell you something. This is terrifying in endgames with no time. When you have like 5 seconds to make your moves, everything looks scary. And this looks extra scary. Queen d7, you know, this looks extra scary. The problem is there's nothing. I mean, black's king is safe, right? Everything is safe. Queen d3, you're covering all the light squares. But all of a sudden, you know, a little bit of this and maybe. And you know what? Disaster happens as Anish plays queen e4 for a queen trade and just straight up hangs his knight. Just straight up hangs the knight in one move. Now, you might say, Levy, this is a terrible game. Why did you show this game in the recap? Well, guess what? Anish lost the second blitz game by hanging a piece also. Like, he literally, in the second blitz game, there was a queen on b4. By the way, the game ends in a few moves. I mean, Jordan just wins. In the second blitz game, there was a queen here, like this, and Anish played bishop e1, and there was a knight and a rook, and then it was just this. So they made 4 draws and then 2 random blitz blunders, and Jordan beats Anish. I don't know. I wanted to cover the games. I mean, that's what I had to work with today. I'm sorry. So after 4 days of action, we've learned a couple of things. Magnus and Pragg tied for first place. Magnus, obviously, don't piss the guy off. All right. If you beat Magnus, just be cool, because now every time Magnus plays you, he's like, well, I don't want to end up a national sensation again. So, yeah, Magnus is mad. Don't make him mad. Duda in clear second with 7. Then it's Liem with 6, and then Anish and Jordan with 5, Mamedyarov with 4, and Hansen with 3. Hansen has won 1 match in the Rapid, lost 3 in the Rapid. He's looking to make a little bit of a push, but half the event is still there. Hope you're enjoying the recaps. I'll see you in the next one. Get out of here.